Hello and welcome to our second installment of exploring anti-racist practices within the Scandinavian fashion industry. I'm very proud and pleased to welcome Rebecca Tandy Norman, co-founder and editor-in-chief of Scandinavia Standard. Thank you for being here today. We're going to talk a little bit about organizing and mobilizing people to get engaged into the practices that we began to talk about yesterday.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts and what have been your inspirations and motivations as to getting involved?
Sure. I think as a business, when you're kind of in a moment in history, you have to look at what are the core values that you have built whatever you are doing upon, and really check yourself and say, are we responding to those core values? Are we putting those core values to the front? Are they what lead our work? So that for me is kind of a first check and a personal check as well as a business check, and in terms of what motivates us, I think we have always we strive to be a business that is values led and that is ethics led, and also to kind of show the world, because we do consider ourselves kind of a bridge between Scandinavia and the rest of the world, and we know that as an English language platform we offer a kind of unique view into what Scandinavia is. And so for us it's about showing not what this kind of stereotypical view of Scandinavia is, but what it really is. What's the Scandinavia we live in? What's the Copenhagen we live in? And why do we love it? And also when you love a place, you critique it because you want it to be the best it can be. So that's kind of the place that we're coming from.
We talked a lot yesterday about using platforms and positions of powers to elevate and give more voice to those who are not heard enough in these debates.
Yeah.
Obviously, these are very big structural things that we're talking about, and therefore it takes a lot of planning and it takes a lot of thinking to do things correctly, and also to stay on target and have goals that will be sustaining for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about how you've been able to incorporate that into the business that you also call a disruptor.
Yeah, I think from the get-go, our business plan has included a values section, and it has included, we always want to talk about ethics, we always want to talk about being not only putting out content that is ethical and responsible, but also internally treating the people who work with us the best we can treat them, working with people that we like, calling out when we see things that aren't right, not working with people that we know to be doing things that we don't agree with, which I think is, in media you can get into a little bit of a dilemma that you do sometimes end up working with people that ethics don't really align with your own, and occasionally to our financial detriment, we've decided not to do that. And I think when other businesses ask us about that, they kind of want to hear this this reassurance that, like, you can be profitable and still say no to some of these people. And I always kind of say, well, with a caveat, which is that you might not be as profitable as you could be if you were to go ahead and do these things that you don't feel so good about in your heart. And that's a choice people have to make. And unfortunately, I think what we've seen with a lot of kind of the social media reckoning that's happened around the civil rights movement going on right now is that people have been making the wrong choices, and then when they're called upon to defend those choices, they really can't. And I just think you need to come from a place of you need to be able to defend the choices that you make with what you believe is right. If you can't do that, then it kind of all becomes like the abyss,
Going back to what you were talking about as far as rebranding Scandinavia, and also critiquing the country and city that you love so much, how would you describe that process? And how do you implement that into a narrative in your publication?
Yeah. I think we've been doing that since we started, which was 7 years ago. And when we started doing it, people were so not ready for that conversation, and or at least kind of a mainstream audience wasn't ready for the conversation. And I remember, I don't know if anyone will remember this site called Exo Jane that was a really big site back in the early 2000s for women. It's no longer in existence, but we wrote some articles for their beauty site, Exo Vane, about kind of diversifying the Scandinavian beauty standard. And I remember the comments on those articles were like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Like, does everything have to be political? Da 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 da. Like those kinds of responses. And it was a progressive site, so I was really, really surprised by that response. And so I think that the way we've gone about doing that is two ways. One is the representation side, who appears on our site, what's the imagery that we use, and the other part of it is what goes on behind the scenes. Who are the perspectives that we are including? Who are the writers that we hire? Who are the photographers that we hire? Who are the brands that we work with? And I don't say that to say that we've like done it right 100% of the time, because I think that we haven't. And I definitely know there are moments where I wish I'd asked that question, or I wish I had driven that point home a little bit more in terms of maybe diversity and imagery or something, whatever it might be. There are moments I look back on and I think I should have been better in that moment. But that knowledge also drives us forward in terms of we're a business that is very much, we're always trying to talk about what could have been better and how we can improve our practices. And we're not a business, and I'm not a person that is scared of being wrong or of having to say I'm sorry. And I think we have gotten to a bit of a point where people often feel scared to say they're sorry, because we talked about this earlier today. It's an admission that you're not perfect. It's an admission that you have things to learn. But I'm the first person to say I have so much to learn, and I think that's the only way to grow. Yeah.
Now, and I wanted this also to be a conversation because you and I have been in conversation for quite some time.
Hours and hours, yeah.
And several weeks, yes. Because I came into contact with you right after the COVID-19 restrictions in Copenhagen began to lift.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, COVID-19 being the big revealer that it is, showcased even more how broken many of the social structures that we operate within were, and that those injustices and inequalities only just came to the surface. And you and I, both having American backgrounds, we're talking a lot about the state of our home country, but also the state of the industries that we work within.
Yeah.
And in conjunction with that, you jumped on board immediately when I proposed the idea of constructing a charter where we could hold the Scandinavian fashion industry accountable and also set goals for what this industry can do.
Right.
First of all, what made you say yes immediately? And second of all, why did this sound like a good idea? Because we've run into a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah. I said yes. I mean, you asked me. So when we're in conversation, I think it's just such a beautiful thing that I feel, and I love talking with you, and that's why I'm here today as well. It's that's just part of it, I think. But I think I said yes because it needs to exist, and I happen to have a platform that has a lot of people that read it, and a lot of people that read it outside of Scandinavia. So we do have a lot of local readers, but the majority of our readers are outside of the region. So that means that we are kind of uniquely situated to be able to put a spotlight on things and call people out, not in a nasty way, but in a way that may get a little bit more attention because it's more of a global platform. So I think as a person who has access to that platform, who runs that platform, I feel a responsibility to use it in a way that will hopefully make changes, positive changes in where we live.
Absolutely. And one thing that we've talked a lot about was the ideal versus the practical. And I want to bring that up because when you begin to construct something that will hold a very complex and old industry accountable to new, modern, progressive standards, there's that concept of practicality.
Yeah.
Now, you and I both agree that we could just rebuild, take it down, fix it,
Right.
and make something new. But the powers that may be are maybe not so inclined.
Right.
So how do we weave through that? And this equally a question to myself, because we had a long list of things that we would love the industry to change immediately.
Yeah.
And I feel that we should continue our ambition.
Yeah.
But how have you also dealt with those conflicting ideas?
Yeah, I think that is the key question when it comes to something like a charter or like a manifesto. You want to create something that is both the absolute ideal and hold yourself accountable to that ideal, but also give people clear and easy steps that they can take so that it doesn't feel like they have to burn their lives to the ground and potentially give up their livelihoods and whatever it may be. And you also don't want to make people feel like they're already evil. I think when you're building something like that, you want to give people the chance to buy into it with their own passion and with their own heart. Because if they don't, I mean, it's nice to have nice words. That's all we'll end up having, right? So we want to create something that people feel they can use, that people feel that will make their businesses better, more ethical, more transparent, more sustainable, all these things that will matter. I also think, and I said it at the beginning, but I think people need to be okay with losing money. And we do live in a capitalist system, but I went to a talk last year where a CEO of a very big company was talking about sustainability, and his big kind of reassurance to people was, don't worry, you can be sustainable and still make the exact same amount of profit. And that just felt like so the wrong message to me, because you might not be able to, and actually that's fine. The profits you're currently earning, I mean, what you're really talking about is your own paycheck, right? Like the profits aren't going to the people at the bottom of the list, or the people who are doing the hard work, right? It's going to a very small amount of people.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct. And also
Yeah.
when we start talking about ideals, we start looking at these structures and how systems are rooted in other destructive
Yes.
systems. And then it's like pulling the thread of the sweater, and all of a sudden it's winter and you have no clothes on. But that said, ambition is so important. And when we started talking about holding the industry accountable, there was so much research. That's also something that we talked a lot about yesterday with Naima. Educate yourselves, and also educate yourselves when wanting to create change in industries. There's so many people doing amazing work.
Yeah.
Black in Fashion Council, Nicole Cavander, who I reached out to in Sweden, again, going back to how can we work together in Scandinavia
Yeah.
and in the Nordic region
Yeah.
to make sustainable change within these practices.
Yeah.
And I was amazed by the innovation, by the organization, and the mobility of getting people together and on board for this. So for me, talking to you was step one, finding someone who I could work with and bounce ideas off of. And then step two was looking around just within our small community of Scandinavia and the Nordic region. And there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much to be gained from working with the group.
Yeah.
And that made me even more passionate about putting together a list or directory of talent that can push these progressive values further, that can show the industry that BIPOC talent exists within the fashion industry in the Nordic region, in Scandinavia. What have you as a publication also done to show and showcase that Scandinavia is more than a leggy blonde?
I think that it starts, as it often does, with representation. Who appears on our website? What are the images that we use? And that's been a struggle, because honestly, a lot of the images we get when we use press images are all white leggy blondes. So we've developed kind of an inclusion rider when we get press images from a brand where we say, these images are lovely. We notice that you're missing racial diversity, or you're missing size diversity, whatever it is that we feel is, it might be all those things, it often is. And do you have any images that suit those parameters? And if you don't, would you consider taking some? We usually get a pretty good response from that. Not always, but sometimes. And I think at least it puts it into people's heads. Hopefully the next time they take press images, they will have those things in their mind. So that's one part. The other is making sure that our content in its actual substance reflects these things. So, we talk about Hygge racism on the website. We talk about Black Lives Matter Denmark on the website. We have a whole directory of Black-owned businesses in Scandinavia, which has been an extremely popular article because I think it might be the only index available right now online of those things. So, at least in English, I haven't seen it in any other languages either, though. So that's really important to us, that the actual content reflects those things as well. And then, of course, it's who you're hiring. So making sure that our team is diverse, that our perspectives are diverse and inclusive, and that we're also open to being told we got it wrong. I think that's the key.
Yeah. Now, very rarely do we open up for process. It's really easy to show results.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up the charter that's in progress and the directory that's in progress is because I believe that activism is also about the journey and the marathon and all of the beautiful and difficult things that happen along the way. Yeah. So just to kind of take a little snapshot of where we're at right now in that process, what do you think that comes to mind right now, one of the main things that the industry needs to do right now, as far as all of the talks that we've had about that?
Well, I think the thing that always feels the most insidious about any movement forward is silence. When people don't speak, when they are silent, when they have a chance to say something, that to me is probably one of the most powerfully negative things you can do. When people refute you, at least you know where you stand with them. When there's silence, it feels like a very, it feels like a wall, and we can't climb over the wall. We need to go through it, right? So I think that definitely people need to say where they stand on things and not be afraid to be, I'll use the word radical, it's not really what I mean, but they need to be okay with being seen as troublemakers, as being disruptors. I think that is a very Scandinavian thing of not wanting to seem that way. And it's probably why I sometimes feel like I don't fit in, because I don't really mind if people don't like me. I hope you all like me, but
we do.
But it's that is not really a Scandinavian characteristic, I have found. So yeah, I think confronting that fear of being okay with being a disruptor, and what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think yes, and I also think right now, employ.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thanks for
being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.